Ruby used to believe love was effort, that marriage meant patience, that sometimes you bend so the home doesn't break. She met Ben when life felt simple. He was confident, charming, the kind of man who made decisions quickly and spoke with certainty. Their marriage started with laughter, long conversations, and closeness that felt effortless. But just 2 years later, Ruby began noticing the silence. Not loud silence, the quiet kind, the one that sneaks in slowly. Ben stopped initiating intimacy. When Ruby tried to talk about it, he would sigh, turn away, or accuse her of asking for too much. "You're too demanding," he said one night. "You don't understand pressure. Are you a horse? You can't just keep going. I need to rest." Ruby laughed it off at first. Then she cried in private. Then she started asking herself dangerous questions. Am I doing something wrong? Am I not attractive anymore? Am I the problem? Ben's frustration didn't arrive all at once. It sharpened slowly, like a blade being honed in silence. Every conversation about intimacy turned into an argument, not because Ruby was aggressive, but because Ben was already defensive before she even spoke. If Ruby asked, "Are you okay?" Ben heard, "You're failing." If she reached for him, he pulled away. If she tried to explain how distant she felt, he accused her of pressure. "You want too much," he snapped one night, sitting on the edge of the bed. "You don't give me space. You make everything about sex." Ruby stood there, stunned, not because of the words, but because of how confidently he said them, as if he had rehearsed them, as if he had already decided the verdict. She tried to defend herself at first. "I'm not asking for too much," she said gently. "I just miss you." But Ben didn't hear longing. He heard demand. And so the bedroom stopped being a place of rest. It became a courtroom. Ben spoke like a prosecutor, sharp, defensive, irritated. Ruby sat like a defendant, confused, apologetic, shrinking. Every night followed the same pattern. Silence, tension, blame. Eventually, Ruby stopped trying. She stopped initiating touch, stopped asking questions that only led to arguments, stopped wearing the clothes that once made her feel confident. The silk nightgowns stayed folded at the back of the wardrobe. Perfume bottles gathered dust. Mirrors became places she avoided. She told herself she was being mature, understanding, supportive, but slowly something else happened. Ruby began disappearing inside her own home. She laughed less. She spoke softer. She walked on emotional tiptoe. She learned Ben's moods the way prisoners learn guards' schedules. What to say, what not to say, when to speak, when to stay quiet. And every time Ben failed to perform, he found a way to make it her fault. "You stress me. You don't make things easy. You expect too much from a man." Ruby absorbed the blame because loving him felt easier than questioning him. But what she didn't know, what Ben himself could barely admit, was that this anger wasn't about Ruby at all. It was about fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Fear of saying the words out loud. "Something is wrong with me." Ben was fighting a battle he couldn't name. A battle no one had taught him how to fight. And the shame of it sat heavy on his chest every night, turning into irritation, criticism, and cruelty he didn't fully understand. So he projected. He blamed. He accused. Because admitting weakness felt more dangerous than hurting the woman he loved. and Ruby unknowingly paid the price for a silence that was slowly destroying them both. Outside the bedroom, Ben was changing too, not in dramatic ways, in the quiet ways people overlook until it's too late. He was always tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles deep in the bones. He came home from work exhausted, sank into the couch, and stayed there. Conversations felt like effort. Laughter felt heavy. Even small decisions irritated him. Ruby noticed the irritability first. Little things annoyed him. The TV volume, the sound of plates clinking, questions that used to feel normal. His patience wore thin, like a thread pulled too often. Then came the headaches. Ben complained about them, constantly tight, pounding aches that sat behind his eyes. He blamed stress, work, traffic, everything except his body. To cope, he reached for sugar. Sugary drinks became his constant companion. Energy drinks in the morning, soft drinks in the afternoon, sweet snacks late at night. Meals were skipped. Exercise disappeared. Even short walks felt like inconvenience. Ruby watched this version of her husband with quiet concern. At night, she noticed something else. Ben got up frequently to use the bathroom. Once, twice, sometimes 3 times before morning. His snoring grew louder, rougher, interrupted by pauses that made Ruby lie awake, listening, counting breaths. Small cuts took longer to heal. A shaving nick stayed red for days. A blister lingered longer than it should. These weren't dramatic symptoms. They didn't scream emergency. They whispered. Ruby mentioned it gently one evening. "Ben, maybe you should see a doctor." He snapped instantly. "I'm fine. Stop acting like a nurse." I said I'm fine. The words were sharp, defensive, final. Ruby didn't argue. She learned that concern sounded like accusation to him. But silence didn't stop the truth from unfolding. Narrator, lower, deliberate. Erectile dysfunction rarely comes alone. It doesn't arrive as a single problem. It arrives as a warning. First, it whispers fatigue, irritability, subtle changes. Then it warns, blood pressure rises, sugar levels climb, sleep breaks. And finally, it exposes what's been quietly building beneath the surface. Diabetes doesn't announce itself loudly. Neither does hypertension. They settle in slowly, damaging blood vessels, dulling nerves, weakening circulation. The same blood flow that feeds the heart, that supplies the brain, that sustains life, is the same blood flow required for sexual function. When that flow is compromised, the body struggles. But shame keeps many men from listening. So they ignore the whispers, dismiss the warnings, and fight the symptoms instead of the cause. Ben wasn't just tired. He wasn't just stressed. And Ruby wasn't too demanding. His body had been asking for help long before his mouth could, and no one had taught him how to answer. The truth didn't arrive with noise. It didn't announce itself. It revealed itself quietly, almost respectfully. It was an ordinary afternoon. Ruby was cleaning the dining table. Receipt, a pen, Ben's keys, and then a brown hospital file. She didn't open it immediately, not because she was afraid, but because she trusted him. She moved it once, then paused. Something about its weight felt deliberate, as if it had been left there on purpose or forgotten because hiding had become exhausting. Ruby told herself she wasn't snooping, and she wasn't. She was just cleaning. She opened the file, and the words stared back at her. Not accusations, not explanations, just facts. Elevated fasting blood sugar. Numbers circled in red. She blinked. Read it again. Early stage type 2 diabetes. Her chest tightened. She flipped the page. Hypertension. High blood pressure. Highlighted. Underlined. Another page. Vascular complications. Early signs. Ruby sat down. Slowly. Carefully. As if standing suddenly might break something. Her hands began to shake. Not from fear, but from recognition. Moments replayed in her mind like a quiet montage. Ben's constant fatigue. The headaches. The irritability. The sugary drinks. The skipped meals. The nights he got up again and again to use the bathroom. The cuts that took too long to heal. The snoring. The distance. And then the bedroom. The blame. The accusations. The way he turned away. The way he made it her fault. Ruby pressed the file to her chest. Not in anger. In understanding. Narrator gentle but firm. Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't rejection. This wasn't lack of desire. This wasn't Ruby being too demanding. This was a body struggling quietly. A man carrying fear he didn't have words for. A health crisis hidden behind pride. Ruby didn't cry immediately. She sat there still letting the truth settle. She thought of every time Ben had snapped, every time he had blamed her, every time she had shrunk herself to protect his ego. And for the first time, she stopped blaming herself. She realized something important. Ben hadn't lied to hurt her. He had hidden the truth because he was scared of it. Scared of the diagnosis. Scared of weakness. Scared of becoming less of a man. Ruby closed the file. Carefully. Respectfully. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel angry. She felt clarity. And clarity sometimes is heavier than pain. Because now she knew. And knowing meant the silence had to end. That night, Ruby didn't argue. She didn't rehearse speeches in her head. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't bring anger into the room. She waited until Ben had finished showering, until the house was quiet, until the day had softened. And then she placed the hospital file gently on the bed. Not thrown, not slammed, placed. Ben noticed it immediately. His shoulders stiffened. His breath changed. "Ben," Ruby said quietly, her voice steady but careful. "This is not about me being demanding." Silence filled the room. Heavy, unavoidable. Ben stared at the file as if it might disappear if he didn't touch it. For the first time in months, he didn't defend himself. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't twist the story. He sat down. Slowly. His hands rested on his knees, fingers shaking just enough to notice. Ruby waited. She had learned patience the hard way. Ben swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said finally. His voice was lower than she had ever heard it. "I kept thinking, maybe it would fix itself." He laughed weakly once. Not from humor, from embarrassment. "I thought if I ignored it long enough, it wouldn't be real." Ruby's eyes filled, but she didn't interrupt. Ben looked at her then, not defensively, not angrily, but exposed. "I was scared," he whispered. Scared you'd look at me differently. Scared I wouldn't be enough anymore. His voice cracked. I thought you'd see me as weak. The word hung in the air. Weak. Everything Ben had been avoiding, every argument, every accusation, every cruel word had been protecting him from that single fear. Ruby sat beside him. Not too close. Not too far. Close enough to be present. She cried not from anger, not from betrayal, but from relief. Relief that the confusion finally had an explanation. Relief that the silence finally had words. Relief that the enemy was no longer unnamed. This was never about me, she said softly. And it was never about sex? Ben nodded. I know, he said. I just didn't know how to be a man and admit I needed help. Ruby reached for his hand. This time he didn't pull away. Narrator, gentle, resolved. In that moment, something shifted. The blame dissolved. The shame loosened its grip. And the problem, once hidden behind pride, finally stood in the open. The enemy had a name now. And when something has a name, it can be faced. Together. After that night, life didn't magically fix itself. Healing isn't a single event. It's a series of small, intentional steps taken together. Ben started treatment. Not just one thing, but a combination of careful, deliberate choices. Regular medical checkups with his doctor. Medication to manage his blood sugar and blood pressure. Lifestyle changes. Walking, exercising, cutting back on sugary drinks. Counseling to confront fear, vulnerability, and shame. Ruby learned patience without erasing herself. She learned that supporting someone doesn't mean losing your own identity. She stopped shrinking. She stopped apologizing for asking for closeness. And she began seeing intimacy in a new way. Intimacy wasn't performance. It wasn't proof of love. It was safety. It was trust. It was communication. It was health. And Ben discovered something he had never admitted before. Vulnerability isn't weakness. Shame doesn't make you stronger. Admitting struggle isn't failure, it's courage. He learned to speak, to ask for help, to accept that needing support doesn't make him less of a man. Erectile dysfunction is rarely just about sex. It can be the first warning sign of serious health issues. Diabetes, elevated blood sugar damages nerves and blood vessels. Hypertension, high blood pressure stiffens arteries, reducing circulation. Heart disease. Compromised circulation affects the heart and sexual function. Chronic stress, mental and emotional strain affects hormones, sleep, and desire. If your partner blamed you instead of checking his health pause. If you are a man struggling, silently speak. Shame delays diagnosis. Silence damages relationships. Early treatment saves lives. This is Health Patrol Stories. Because sometimes the body tells the truth before the mouth does. And sometimes listening is the first step to healing together.